Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HTML All the Things podcast, episode number 10, CSS Transitions and Animations. I'm your host, Matt Lawrence, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Mike Curran. What have you been up to this week, Mike?
Yeah, hey Matt. So this week has been a little bit more focused on HTML All the Things. I'm almost done the next part of the Vue.js tutorial. It's going to focus a little more on dynamically building pages using the components that we created in the first tutorial. You'll be able to kind of play around with some JSON, and the JSON will structure your page based on some hooks that we put in. But yeah, stay tuned for that. That's probably going to be releasing sometime at the end of this week. And then other than that, the client work has been pretty steady, so I've been pretty busy most of the time, because kind of split my day now between HTML All the Things and client work, focusing on redesigning this one camera application that we have. So other than that, that's it. What about you, Matt?
Sounds like a busy week, but it's always good that when you get more of that HTML All the Things stuff going, right? Because that Vue.js guide was liked by many. Even I have it legitimately bookmarked, as we've discussed before the show. So yeah, give that a look if you have not done that yet. But my week has been a little bit of client work, as we said last week. It's kind of like petering down. Did a couple of updates for some clients, and that's kind of it, because my focus is on HTML All the Things. One of the things I think we've discussed is that, we've kind of figured out our social media strategy. So we're just sort of enacting that now, and just kind of moving forward with that. So that's one thing, and you'll kind of hopefully see more consistency on our socials, just like more content on there. So give that a go for sure. As we said it before, we also have a Patreon that's brand new. So patreon.com/HTML All the Things. Go check out the tiers and give that a go. And a brand new thing this week that I created was a subreddit. So we're on Reddit now, reddit.com/r/HTML All the Things. And so what we basically want that to be is we're obviously going to be sharing our links in there. Right now, there's just literally a single link in there to Mike's Vue.js guide. However, we want that to sort of be a place where people share their work and, get a conversation going, talk about typography, talk about, coding something, developing something, talk about new frameworks, like the whole spectrum, web dev, web design, the whole thing. Let's get a conversation going. So feel free to, subscribe to that, share your work, share your links, whatever. There's full rules in there and everything. So make sure you read those before posting. And that's basically it. Yeah, we're trying to get a bit of a community going. So this is the very beginnings of that. And actually the creating of the subreddit will come up in our web news section for today as well. As Mike heard from me, it's a bit of a disaster creating a subreddit these days. So, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that later. But basically, what we're going to be covering, I'll do our traditional kind of rundown is what we're doing. So obviously, we're doing CSS transitions and animations, and basically what we're doing is just that. Transitions versus animations. So, which ones do you use, why you use them, what's the differences, etc. Obviously, because we're doing more advanced stuff, like more than just laying things out, we need to keep performance in mind. So we need to talk about, what notable things you should do for performance and what kind of pitfalls you could fall into with performance. And also, I want to like kind of full disclaimer it that for the most part, I use transitions. I do use transitions and animations, but I mostly use transitions. So what a lot of this is going to be is us discussing our experience and some stuff from other articles regarding transitions and animations. And what I want to do is actually try to kind of look up and work with transitions and more specifically animations, because I use that the least out of the two. Use animations more and kind of try to enhance my experience with it and get better. And maybe you'll see some of that on Medium or on the social, or maybe even a future podcast episode. But we have several segments and several sub-segments this week, so I'll go over the main segments as we always do. Segment number 1, transitions versus animations, with a bunch of sub-segments in there. Segment number 2, which is how transitions and animations improve UX. Segment number 3 is performance. Segment number 4 is animation frameworks. And then, of course, the recurring segment, web news, inconsistencies, and separation. And as I said, we'll get an interesting conversation going there, because it was a bit of a rage-fueled one before the show. So, we'll get going there. But we'll jump right into the first segment, and I'll cover that one. One thing I do want to mention is that I did use, for reference, I did use an Adobe Press article named Transition or Animation, which one you should use. I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes, and you have to kind of click through the pages, like it's different pages for each actual page of the article. So just something to keep in mind there. But I basically use that to sort of brush up on just my official terminology in case you guys want to Google some of the stuff, as well as just to make sure I didn't forget anything going forward. So anyway, without further ado, let's move into the first subsection here. So we're going to do a brief overview of transitions. So what is a transition? So basically, transitions are set off by a trigger. They run forward, or they like start and run right to the end when a trigger is active, and then they do reverse, so they go backwards through the transition when the trigger is removed. And you can choose a property that is changed, and how long it takes to change. So for example, if you wanted to change the color of a box shadow on something, that's what you would do. You would, define, I want to change the box shadow and I want to change its color. And then you can say, oh, I want it to change over a 2-second period. That's how you do that. A common trigger that I use, and I'm sure everyone else will use, is of course hover. I use that probably 99% of the time. But there's also a bunch of other ones. Some of these I've actually never used myself, but they were from the article, as I said. So they are link, active, visited, focus, checked, and disabled. I have used a few of these, some of them I haven't, but those are some of the other kind of triggers that come into play. There's also some additional properties you can use, like people will use like ease in, ease out, ease in, out, so to kind of like smooth it over kind of thing, and you'll kind of see that effect if you're experimenting with transitions moving forward. So I have a common use case here, so of course, common use case would be you hover over a button. So let's say the button originally has a box shadow and it has like a light gray box shadow, and you want the shadow to get darker. So one way to do that is to literally change the color from the light gray to black, let's say, with a bit of an opacity. So you would say your initial state, so the start is light gray, and then on the hover, so there's your trigger, you then want the box shadow color to turn to black, and then once the hover is done, it transitions from the black back to the light gray. And so those are like the trigger and non-triggered states. If you notice, there's only 2 states with transitions, and that's very key for when, sort of selecting whether you want transitions and animations, which kind of segues us into the next subsection here, which is a brief overview of animations. So animations are very similar to transitions. However, they offer fine control over changing properties. They can run in a loop, they can run forwards, they can run backwards, they can stop, they can pause. You can control an entire animation via their keyframes. So you can have stages like, let's say, for half of the animation, so for half of the time you want an object to move left, and then you want it to change color, and then you want it to move back really quick. So you could do that in an animation, but you cannot do that. You cannot have that sort of control within a transition. You can also, or one thing to note, I should say, is in an animation, because of this fine control, typically there is more coding required. So it's not like an awful lot, like it's CSS still, right? It's a lot of CSS and maybe some JS if you're doing some more fine control. But, just keep that in mind. If it can be completed with a transition, you might as well just do it with a transition. And also one other thing I got that I thought was interesting, and I noted from the article, as I mentioned, was it's more difficult to actually manipulate an animation with JavaScript, because you're naming your animation whatever you want, like you're naming your animation, fade in box or something like that. Whereas with a transition, you're using like intrinsic or sort of like default values where you can easily just address the properties of an object, the CSS properties of an object from the CSS. So, it's doable, but it's just something to know. If you can use a transition, kind of do it. So then that's a perfect segue actually into what to use and when. So I kind of have this broken down into even further segments here. So I have animations must be used when and I have a list here, when you need multiple stages. So it's like, that was the one example I used. So if something happens halfway through, or specifically near the end, or the speed changes, or you want to introduce, more and more and more pieces of an animation, like you want it to flip, then change color, change the font size, like a whole bunch of things. You need the stages at different times. This is when you use animations. You also need to use animations if you require the ability to start, stop, or pause an animation. You also need to run, also if you need to run the animation forwards and backwards. So as we said, transitions do run forwards and backwards, but it runs forwards when the trigger state is engaged. And then when you remove the trigger, it automatically reverses. It goes backwards. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is if you need sometimes for the backwards to be triggered upon a button click or something like that, chances are you're going to need an animation. Also, if you need precision control. So like I said, you want halfway through the animation, you want the text to suddenly get bigger, and then in the last second of the animation, you want the text to get smaller than it was, and then you want all this like crazy stuff happening, like because it really, really varies on what you're doing. If you want that type of precision control, which is done via keyframes, then you need animations, guaranteed. So then moving on from that then, so when should transitions be used, basically? So when you want to basically do something simple, so if you want a simple trigger animation, remember, 2 states, triggered or not triggered. Basically, it's you don't need advanced control. You need something easy and typically common, like a button hover effect or a menu sliding out from the side, like you click the navicon, the menu comes out from kind of off the screen there, kind of slides in from the left or slides in from the right. And also my personal opinion here is when I was starting out, I tried to use animations first because I saw they were more advanced. And this was when I was really just starting out with HTML and CSS, and they started to confuse me a little bit. So what I did was I went to the easier and more commonly used in my itinerary, actually, transitions. I started using that because they were easier, and I started starting to get into the groove. And then I realized during, I forget which project exactly, but I realized I was like, I need this animation to be more than just, my box shadow grew or my color changed. I need it to be more than that. Quick Google reveals, hey, you need to start using animations now. And I was able to transition from transitions to animations rather easily. It was just a little easier for myself. So maybe if you're just getting started, because transitions are easier, I would suggest you actually use transitions first. That's my personal opinion there. And something to note as well, you can actually call an animation kind of like how you would a function. So like I said, you kind of create your animation with your keyframes, and you can call it whatever you want, button hover effect or button fade in or whatever. And what you do is, if you have a standard button effect, so let's say you call your animation button fade in, and you have a standard animation for when buttons fade in throughout the entire site, rather than writing in your transition over and over and over again on every single button or applying the same class, you could essentially call that animation or run that animation on your various elements. It just really kind of depends how you have your CSS set up and how you've done it so far. Just to try to remove some of that redundancy, you may want to use an animation, because I almost equate it in my own head to a JavaScript function almost, where you can just call it and be like, hey, this element, let's run the button fade in, for an example. Because a lot of places will have, the same fade in, the same fade out, the same slide in or slide out animations. So if you can do it once and just kind of call it, might be easier for you in that way. But remember, it does require more properties and more settings and more of that. But once it's done, it's done. So just something to keep in mind. Unless Mike has any comments on this, I think I'm going to pass it off to him for the second segment, because that concludes the first one there.
Yeah, so I think you covered that really well, Matt. I don't have a super large amount of experience with animations and transitions, but I definitely do use them. I just off the top of my head, recently when I was doing that hat template, I think I used an animation because we were using keyframes for that, and it turned out pretty awesome. So that I think that's kind of like just a flashy way of doing it, and that's what I wanted it from that template point of view.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to move on to actually the segment called How Transitions and Animations Improve UX. So the reason I'm doing this segment is not because I have a huge amount of experience with it, but because one of my next projects is going to really keep this in mind. I'm not going to be really the one that's going to choose when to use the transitions and animations, but I'll definitely be implementing them. But I do have a very close relationship with the designer that's going to be like developing these animations and deciding when to use them, and she's kind of helped me understand some of these topics a little more as time goes on, and I definitely will understand it more maybe the next time we do an episode on animation, so stay tuned for that. But I'm just going to give you a nice quick overview of my own experience and a little bit also from an article that I found on Medium, which we will also link in the show notes. So the first thing is build with animation in mind. So I fully understand this because when you add animations in later, like if you were just like building a static site and then you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to add animations in, it's going to feel kind of half-baked. It's not going to feel like the animations are naturally there for a reason. It's going to be more they're there because just you wanted to put them there, even though you think that like you added them for some sort of a reason. Usually when you do it as an afterthought, it's not a good idea. Another example of that would be like when you're designing a navigation gesture platform. People know that swipe left and swipe right do different things, and if you add an animation to that when you're doing it, you can save a little bit of space on your screen for maybe not putting such a big back button in, maybe not putting menu buttons everywhere, because you know that the user will just do the swipe animation just like they do on their phone all the time. So you're saving space like that in a mobile menu. That's a big reason why you want to build with animation in mind. So let's go with the next topic, which would be don't add an animation just to be flashy. Add it with purpose. So purposes could be like showing content is interactable. So having a content light up as your mouse moves over it, or when you're scrolling, having content pop in and kind of vibrate in place to show that it's clickable. And then you can also do something like showing that something is occurring. So like a loading bar or maybe like a stack coming down from the top or from the bottom to show that it's loading. Then you can show it being finished by just like kind of flashing or something like that. Or there's many ways to show these things, but it's important to kind of use animations to get a point across to the user. And you can also use it to make a user focus on something important. So for instance, your page loads, maybe makes content bounce a little bit that you want people to look at right away, because right as the page is finished loading, if something's bouncing, you know that's going to catch the user's eye. Using stuff like that, don't overuse it. Don't be like, oh my god, I'm going to put animations everywhere. Let's put animations in the nav bar, the middle, the bottom, all at the same time. You know the user's not going to be able to process all that, and it's just going to confuse them. The other thing is you're gonna have issues with performance as well, so make sure you keep that in mind. That'll actually be the next segment that Matt will cover, but he'll get to that soon. So other than that, there's don't overwhelm the user as well. So it's kind of the same thing, but just make sure that they have the right focus. So when you do an animation, make sure the user focuses on just the one animation. Don't go crazy with it. Like I was saying, don't put it in every single element of your page. Also, another big thing is don't make the animation run too long either. So if you have like a loading animation, make sure it's actually using some sort of progress bar from the JavaScript code. Don't just put a progress bar just for the sake of a progress bar, because a user is going to want everything to happen fast. If they see an animation, even if it's the best animation they've ever seen, they're going to be a little bit upset because they have to do it probably many times, and they're going to be like, well, why is it taking the same amount of time every time? Why is it so long when you could have just done it like a real quick flash or something like that? So keep animations really short as they need to be, and to prove the point that you're trying to do. Don't extend them just to extend them to be flashy. And the last thing that I want to kind of talk about is keep animations consistent with the associated gesture or click. So an associated gesture would be something like sliding between tabs. So if you're sliding between tabs, kind of give like that motion of the sliding panels. So that would be like a transition or an animation of just sliding panels. Keep those kinds of things in mind when developing. So don't just make it so that you swipe up at the top and then all of a sudden something on the bottom happens. A user's going to get confused real quick. So adding those animations to your gestures will make it very easy for the user to understand the gesture and then to use it over and over again. Also, keeping the gestures consistent with gestures they already know, like swiping, like scrolling, stuff like that. If they already know how to do that, if they've done it through their phone, like if their phone has those new animation gestures in iOS, and Android's now adopting them as well, where pull up to go home, maybe you can add those in to your application. That's kind of a new thing that's happening. So you could easily have an indication that it is there, but maybe you have a cookie in there, and if they've done it so many times, get rid of that indication, and people will just instinctively start doing it if they use their application for long enough. Keep in mind again that the application has to also correspond with the operating system running on it. So if you're going to have a home gesture that swipes up from the bottom, make sure it swipes up from the bottom, not from the very bottom, because that's where like the iOS gesture is. So make it a little bit higher, indicate that that's where it is initially, and go from there. Another good indicator for an animation is when you tap, there's like a little like a pebble just dropped in water. I really like that animation. I think definitely we'll be using that in the next application that we develop. So I just wanted to mention it. It's kind of a cool indicator that, yeah, you did something, right? The user likes to know that they've done something. They don't like it when they click on it and something's happening in the background. They don't know that they've done it, or they click on it and an instant transition happens and throws them into a different screen that they're not ready for. Users like to know that they're interacting with your application, not just using it. But yeah, other than that, that's my quick little rundown of when and how to use the transitions and animations to improve your user experience. So it's not too in depth, like I said. I don't have the most experience with this, but I think these kinds of like base knowledge will really help you in the future. So I'm hoping that you'll take it into account with your next application. But other than that, unless Matt again has any comments on this segment, I'm going to pass it on to him.
Yeah, so I do actually have a comment. The first thing that came to mind when you mentioned that first part, the build with animation in mind, or else it kind of feels half baked after. It's really reminiscent to me, and it's kind of rare nowadays. But when phones started getting websites, a lot of sites, especially older ones, even at that time, was a lot of just text and images. So, and a lot of it was tables actually. So realistically speaking, it was relatively easy to make them responsive. But what would happen is the one thing that isn't really responsive is the navbar. It's one of the most interactable parts of a site, just like, especially just like a static, text site, or even just like a news site. So one of the things I'd seen in the past is, like a real basic text site, a few images, maybe it's a really old blog, and then like a really modern material design navbar comes in. And it's really, like, it works, but it's really weird. Like, it looks very strange and it's off-putting. It's like, I shouldn't notice your navbar, like I should use it, and the animations should almost subconsciously enhance it. But I shouldn't see and be like, whoa, that's a modern navbar.
Yeah, that's the thing I was saying with the it's half baked, right? Like, so half of the website, it's almost jarring to see like all this old design technology, and then all of a sudden a new design plopped on top of it. Yeah.
And that's actually something to mention too, is we've had clients approach us and they'll say, hey, we want to retrofit our current site. Sometimes you have to kind of say no, and sometimes you have to really, kind of stick to that opinion and say, hey guys, like, this is not a good idea. Like, I don't think that we should be retrofitting this. We should be straight up just doing it. Like, you know what I mean? We should be straight up redoing this. Because I'm sure a lot of those guys are probably trying to keep the cost down and either install the navbar that themselves, or they hired somebody and said, hey, I need this to be responsive, but I don't want to like pay more than $200 or something. Yeah. So it's like just one of those things. So it's just something to keep in mind. Also, the don't overwhelm users with animations. That's another good thing is I kind of mentioned it there, is an animation should be enhancing the experience, but almost subconsciously. I shouldn't be like, whoa, that's a cool animation. Could you imagine like having a really flashy but like 2-second animation every single time a page changed?
Yeah, it would drive me crazy.
Because especially if it's like a data site where you're trying to get the data off of it, for whatever reason, you're trying to collect the data, you're trying to press the download button, whatever you're trying to do on there. If you're using it for work, and it's animating every couple of seconds, or it's animating for too long, where it's like, I just want to click this download button. Come on, Yeah. So just one of those things to kind of keep in mind with your animations. I think that's kind of a key thing that you mentioned there. So moving on, I think, to segment number 3, performance. So performance, because we're starting to do sort of more elegant things when you get into transitions and to animations, you're getting into the more advanced features, I would say, of the HTML, CSS, JS spectrum kind of thing. So So too many transitions, of course, or very complex animations can cause serious, like very serious performance problems, like rendering problems, especially in older browsers, especially in slower devices. And then you get the double whammy where you have the guy that has an old device that can't update the browser because the browser's lost support. So now you got an old browser, an old device, and it's a bit of a mess there. So another thing to kind of mention with that though is that the browser will run animations better over time. So the first run might be very slow or glitchy. Like let's say you click a button and a menu flies in. Maybe it skips like the first 3 frames, or it jitters, or it messes around. Like it's not good. It's not 60 FPS. It's not smooth. This is really easy to overlook because if you're developing something, you're constantly testing it. Maybe you're going to click that button 5-6 times to see the animation, and the first time it's going to glitch. The next 5-6 times it isn't, and you're going to be like, whoa, it's running fine. And then at that point, it's very, very easy to overlook the fact that it's actually messing up the first time. So that's a really big kind of red flag for, first of all, new users, and second of all, those people I just mentioned that have the older and the slower browsers, right? You can only support back so far. I understand that. If someone is demanding that they use Windows XP and they want to use the latest version of Chrome, if that's supported on there, or whatever browser that supported on there, and maybe support ended 4 years ago. Like there's a point in which you have to, unfortunately, cut people off, or you're never going to advance. So, keep that in mind. But, to make sure that, especially your first time user guys, don't get that really awkward little glitch, because your browser is like running it better. It's like caching it a bit. Maybe it's the device, clearing its RAM to make sure that the page has enough, computing power assigned to it, that type of thing. Whatever the device is. So like your animation is going to get smoother. So one thing that we will do, and we had this problem, I think it was on List by Design, maybe a couple other ones, but one thing that we do is we open up a fresh, this is very key, a fresh incognito window, because it will also start to get that effect where it starts running animations better. So it's like you open a fresh incognito window, and then you run your animation, and you ensure that it runs good the first time. And you do that like 10 times. So you close out all the incognito windows now, all that cache and all that's gone. You then open another incognito window and you do it again and you do it again. You keep doing that, a fresh one. Because otherwise, like I said, it'll get that cache, the CPU and everything, like the OS, whatever it's running, will start assigning more resources to it. So ensure that you do that, because you want that first impression to be nice, especially if your animation is like on intro. I can't even count the amount of times I've been to a site where, it's a classic product site where they have an app or something, and the site's more or less a business card, and you go there and it's like a big flashy banner or a big flashy video or a big flashy animation, followed by, your classic, oh, here's all the companies we've worked with, here's our editorials, come download our app, that type of thing, the one pagers. That original big bold video or animation or whatever, if that's really glitchy, and I've seen it happen, if that's really glitchy and buggy and it's not due to my connection speed, it's kind of a bad first impression. It's like, oh, that kind of runs like garbage. You know what I mean? So just something to keep in mind. Just don't jar people with it. Wow people with it if you can. So that's just something that we learned. And when I say incognito window, that's sort of the Chrome equivalent to opening up like a private browser. So, it's different per browser, but you get my meaning. No cache, no nothing. That's what you do. So like I said, thorough testing. In addition to that, though, you should also be doing the fresh incognito test on different devices, whether that be on an older phone of some sort, maybe it's like the last phone that you support. Have one of them kicking around. They're probably only like $100 or something, or you can even borrow one off a friend that used to have one. Test it on there. Make sure that the lowest device that you want to support is getting at least decent FPS. If you're getting 30 FPS because the GPU in that thing just can't handle it, then it just can't handle it, but at least it's smooth 30, or at least it's usable, right? Because also another thing is that the people using those older devices, they know, because they have an older device, that things don't run perfectly. But if yours runs good, maybe not perfect, but good, or if you make it run perfect, which would be awesome, then that's like something that's like a pro for them, right? So and you might even impress some people if you're working in an enterprise environment where they don't update all the time. So that's just one thing. Now we have some, I call them quote unquote hacks, but you take them as you will. So basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to get hardware acceleration working. So a lot of guys, and myself included, will turn off hardware acceleration in the browser by default. So it doesn't really need, hardware acceleration. But sometimes you need it. If you have a lot of animations, you need that hardware acceleration. You need the GPU to kick in and start to render what you're doing. So to do that, you can kind of, in your CSS, you can use things like I personally call them hacks. It's like the Translate 3D hack, where you have the Translate 3D property in one of your elements, in the element that you're animating, or maybe on the body or whatever, depending on your use case. And it doesn't actually do anything. It's like, translate 3D 000. It's not actually translating. But the instant that the browser sees, hey, I need to do a 3D animation here, or I need to do a 3D translate here, or if you do translate Z or translate Z, if you do one of those, the browser will kick in and, like, in our case, or in the case that I'm talking about, the computer will, or even the phone will ask the GPU, hey, I need some help. I need you to render this. And of course, the GPU, especially if it's dedicated, is a lot more powerful than just your processor trying to do it. So that's like one little, like I said, quote unquote hack. And then I just read about today, because as I said, I use transitions a lot, but I don't use animations a heck of a lot. So I just read today, as I was flipping through doing a little research for the show, and there was somebody that mentioned that the will-change property, the will change property in CSS is sort of the future. And so Translate 3D and Translate Z or Translate Z appear to be, the older way to do it. And, some browsers will need to have those properties instigated if they don't understand the will change. But it's an article by, I hope I'm saying this name properly, Jose Rosario on Medium. I'm going to link that in the show notes, and I also actually tweeted it out on our Twitter, so go give that a go if you want to take a look. But he goes through how to get animations to be 60 FPS, really, really nice, and he really breaks down all the pieces and all the bits, and he shows the charts as to, like, oh, there's a bottleneck here, we need to make these, like, it's a really good breakdown. So I suggest you go and take a peek at that, and that's definitely something that I'm going to be reading more than, because I just skimmed through it, I'm actually going to be reading through that to enhance my animation skills kind of moving forward. So definitely go and give that a go. I think that's it for performance, and I think I can actually toss it over to Mike for the fourth segment here. Give it a go, Mike, unless you have any comments on the last one, of course.
Yeah, just a quick comment with jQuery animations. Since we've had experience with, like, the native ones, I just want to provide a little bit of my experience with jQuery. So initially, it was just like a fade out, fade in animation that I was doing, and when I took over the project, it was using jQuery, and we noticed that it was really, like, it kind of jagged. The animation was jagged just for fading, which is weird. Like, I didn't understand why that was happening. But as soon as I switched it to, like, a native animation, it was probably a transition. Just transition opacity to 0. Give it a couple seconds. It was really smooth. So if you're having issues with your jQuery animations, just take them, put them into the, like, native JS, and that should solve your problem. Other than that, yeah, great little performance piece. So I'll move on to my animation framework. So again, preface this with, I haven't actually used any of these frameworks. I just did a little bit of research online and just chose top 3. They're not exactly the top 3, but they're 3 frameworks that are very popular, and they kind of represent different aspects of animation in CSS. So I'll start with 3.js, and this one kind of blew my mind a little bit. I don't really do too much rendering, but I have seen it before. But this is a full 3D render capable framework, so you're able to do actual full-on 3D rendering, lighting, shadows, stuff like that. It's dependent on WebGL protocol, so it fully utilizing your graphics card as much as your browser will give it. So if you're looking to do something complex, I guess that would be where this would come in. So if you actually want to have, like, maybe a little bit of an actual, like, flashy render piece, maybe like a sphere rotating for your website in the background, and maybe based on actions on the website, the sphere does different lightings or something like that. If you want to have something that flashy, and again, keep in mind this isn't really that practical if you're looking at it on an old phone, because I'm sure that they can't really handle stuff like that. But if you're doing a portfolio piece, or if you're doing a very specific application that you know what devices it's going to be running on, then this is something that you could definitely take advantage of. It's the downsides that I've read so far is that it's a little bit complex, and I can kind of attest to that because I just looked at a quick API documentation. I'm like, okay, I don't even know where to start with this. There was like camera angles that you have to account for, and like putting different cameras there. Like it's kind of like a render suite, like you're an Unreal Engine for the browser, which is kind of crazy. God. Yeah, which I think Unreal actually has a mobile ready engine as well. But like this is kind of, you're writing it in JavaScript instead of whatever Unreal uses, which is, yeah, it's definitely interesting. And it's apparently been around for 8 years. So people are saying that that's a little bit, it's become a little bit bloated, but it's still supported. So, I mean, it's definitely still, I think, worthwhile to check out if you want to do something that complex. So the next framework that I'm going to talk about is anime.js. And this is more of a opposite scale. So this is more of a fast, like really good performance for your animations. And it's more practical animations. So doing your, fading, doing your sliding, doing your a little bit of scrolling, a little bit like stuff like that. It's more practical website day-to-day use animations. It also can support some more complex vector-based animations. It also, I'm sure, is dependent on WebGL and can do a little bit of 3D rendering, but it's more designed to be used as an everyday library where you can actually use it for your UX experience, in my opinion, from what I read. So it could potentially replace 3JS from what I'm reading for people, because it's a little bit faster to start up with. So again, when I looked at the API documentation, because it's not doing crazy amount of 3D rendering, it actually starts in a more simple spot. As I look further through the API, I can see that it's really powerful in the sense that it does get very complicated, and it does give you the ability to do many, many different things. But I can see starting up with it being a lot easier and a lot quicker. So the next thing I want to talk about is scroll reveal.js, and this is a specific library, and as the name mentions, scroll, it's a library to do a scrolling animation. So when you're scrolling down, you want stuff to pop in, you want stuff to fade out. This is what you want to use. So when you're doing something like a simple website, a one pager, right, and you want like maybe your main 3 topics to have a nice fade in animation while you're scrolling, and you want to base it on the scroll, I think this is a really good option because it's the lightest of all 3. It's the easiest to implement because it's only doing one thing, right? And it's doing one thing really well. This is a really high, very popular library, so you know it's doing it really well. And it's kind of like, it's kind of what I would lean towards probably if I need to do animations. I would lean towards maybe using a couple of different libraries, because I'm not going to be doing anything crazy. I'm going to be doing, most of the animations that I'm going to be doing, I can probably handle in pure JS. Like, I'm not going to use a library. But if I want to do something a little more fancier and I don't want to spend like a bunch of time writing a driver for that, then I'm going to probably go in and use a scroll reveal.js and library, or maybe there's a tab reveal or something like that. Like, so those are kind of my perspectives on when I would use these. So take it with a grain of salt, because again, I don't have any experience with any of these. The next time we come back, I'll have done that big animation project. I might be able to comment more on which one I chose, if I chose a framework, why frameworks are important, and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. So I'm gonna keep this short, and I'm gonna pass it off for web news to Matt, unless Matt again has any comments on this portion.
Yeah, I actually did. So, as we've mentioned several times in the show, I'm not really a guy that would use frameworks, libraries, and stuff too often. Like, I will if I need to, and I will if it's going to help me a lot. But I kind of stay away from that. And I just installed VS Code. I was a Notepad++ guy. So, but one thing I will say is that I put animations, complex ones specifically, I put complex animations into the same realm of using Canvas. Now, I know they're totally different things, but what I mean is in terms of doing something complex on Canvas and doing something complex in doing an animation, it's like I understand how to do it generally. Like, I understand I got to move it here, I got to use these keyframes, I got to use this, whatever, to keep it in the animation space. Same with Canvas. It's like, I understand I need this like layer, and I need to move this here, and blah, 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 blah. But one thing is that it's very tedious. And it's like, at times, like if you're trying to do something very complex and you look it up, especially in Canvas, to go a little off topic, especially in Canvas, if you look it up and it's like you have to do like all these crazy grids and know like the coordinates and that type of thing. I kind of equate that type of thing, that kind of monotony, to an animation. Understanding like, oh, I translated by this many degrees and I got to move it back over. Like it's so I would use like a library. So like I said, I'm going to expand my knowledge, and I'm going to probably do that without using a library. But when it comes to, if I needed to do some crazy thing or something super common like the scroll reveal, there's no point in me reinventing the wheel in doing it, because at the end of the day, it's like I'm going to come up with like a dev team, as far as I understand it, a dev team, or even maybe one person, I have not looked this up, but somebody made scroll reveal, and they did that by like making just that. If I'm trying to do the same thing as scroll reveal in a single website, I'm not going to do it as well, because I'm focusing on the entire project. Whereas when somebody made scroll reveal, their project was scroll reveal. So that's just an example, because when you start getting into these complex things, it's tedious sometimes, it's monotonous it's monotonous if it's complex, and it can hurt your performance very easily if you do it wrong or do it inefficiently. So that's just something to keep in mind, is like, even this, I would look at scroll reveal. I wouldn't, like, it's the same with like light boxes. It's like, I could make my own light box every single time. First of all, that's boring. And second of all, like, why? You know, if that library disappeared tomorrow, I could make my own, of course. That's kind of the important thing to me, is like, oh, I understand what's going on here generally. I'm going to go use this thing because it's quicker. That's kind of where I sit with this type of thing. So just something of note, kind of a personal point there. So we're going to move on to the recurring segment, web news. And this one kind of complements the app overload thing, with a little bit of differences, of course. So it's titled Inconsistencies and Separation. So you'll see the parallels in a moment with the app overload web news from a few weeks ago. But I'm going to go through here. I'm going to go through a few of the points, and then, of course, we will go through and have a discussion on it. So most of the inconsistencies that I can think of are between mobile versions, so whether that be the mobile website or an app, versus desktop apps, or even like a desktop full site. So, for example, I can't check a publication's stats on the Medium app for Android. Unless it's hidden somewhere, I can't find it. I don't know where it is, but when I go on the PC, I simply go to the publication and I can just go and look at the stats. I have yet to find that on Android, and like, why? Like, why is that something that's not on mobile? I understand sometimes you need something that, you know, maybe it should be on desktop because a mouse and keyboard is the way to do it, and so they don't want to give you the option to try to like awkwardly do it with your finger, you know, because it's less precise. I understand that, but looking at statistics, come on, guys. Facebook app. So the Facebook app has inconsistencies and, in my opinion, glitches across the desktop and mobile app. So sometimes like a window will appear, like it'll be like, hey, we're going to give you $5 to boost this post. And I'll go in there and I'll kind of poke around, read it or whatever, and I'll accidentally close it. And I have no idea how to get back to that window. It's just gone. Just gone. Like, I don't know where it is. And maybe, and to bring it back to inconsistencies, we recently had like a few likes on one of our posts. And I went in there and you know, Facebook, one of the notifications was, hey, you should really go in there and invite the people that liked your post to like the page. So I said, oh, that makes sense. So I go in there and it opens up an interface, and this is within the Facebook app. So it opens up an interface, and I went to go click invite on people. So there was an invite and a ban button on each person. So I go and click invite, and normally with Facebook, there's some sort of indication that I've done an action, or like even like I'll click a button and there'll be an indication I've done an action, like it'll say invited, and then the button's invalid because I've already invited. I kept trying to like send people invites. It wasn't doing it. It was not like there's no animation, nothing. It would do like this weird like hover/click effect because I was on a phone, and to like indicate I was indeed clicking the button, but it wasn't actually doing anything. It didn't say invited, didn't do anything, didn't remove the person from the list. So I have no idea what was going on. In the middle of doing that, I noticed that the pages manager inside of the Facebook app was a little bit different. Like it was like, oh, you can quickly get to your pages, and this is like kind of like a new layout. So I assume it had updated the previous night. So I went into the page itself rather than clicking on the notification. Went to the page itself, went to the post, did the same thing. It comes back up, and I still can't click those invite buttons. I then installed the Pages Manager app, or the Pages app, whatever they call it. It's like a separate app that Facebook uses for managing your pages. I then install that, thinking, oh, maybe I'll be able to do it in there. No, still doesn't work. So there's just that inconsistency. It's like, what's going on here? I haven't even tried it on desktop yet. I probably should. But it's like, that's a glitch or an inconsistency or something. Like what's going on here? Like that. Come on, guys. Twitch.tv. If you guys watch video game streamers and stuff like that, or IRL streamers, as I suppose they call them, as the kids call them, as if you will. But if you have rewards, so if you're a Twitch Prime person, if you're a Twitch Prime subscriber, and you want to claim some of your rewards, you can't do it in the app. You can't do it in the desktop app. You got to go to the desktop site. What's going on there?
You can't do it on the desktop app? Seriously?
Nope, can't do it. That's it. And you can't.
Oh yeah.
If you go to someone's channel, opens up the opens up the tab. If you go to because I'm on the Windows 10 app. If you go to the Windows 10 app, if you click on someone's channel, I think it's their channel, or maybe it's their VODs. It just opens up a new tab. So I might as well just use the frickin' browser version. Like it's useless. Like that app is useless to me now.
Yeah. If you click on videos, it opens up a new tab.
Yeah. So like inconsistencies, like what's going on here? And then on addition to that, I'll go in and I'll be like, okay, you can sign into Twitch on the browser on the phone, and then you can go to you can go into the little drop down. You can say I want to go into desktop mode because they have like two different sites. It's kind of an older way to do it, but they have two different sites. A desktop and a mobile version. So you do that, and then the stupid thing for me opens up the app. So it's like, okay, now I got to go incognito. I got to sign in again. And then I got to go request the desktop site, which is a terrible experience on a phone. I got to zoom in. I got to go find the little thing. I got to click it. And it's like first world problems, I understand. But come on, man. Like who when they went through this UX, who was like, oh, this is fine. Like if a person's on the go, who cares?
That's
like,
the
come
point.
on. Like why? Who's at their computer all the time? And I guarantee these kids are on, I mean, I've never tried the tablet version, but I guarantee these kids are on their tablets or their phones. And they're watching the Twitch. They're not on a PC. Like that's old. That's an old people device now. Getting there, or a gamer device, right? So anyway, that's my 2 cents there. And oftentimes, just as a general statement, not anything specific to any one service, but there's often a lack of admin features in a mobile app. So it's like, oh, you just can't change your credit card information, or you just can't change certain advanced account functions. It's like, again, if it's a drawing app and it wants me to use a stylus, and like the stylus is only compatible with PC, so it's not going to let me draw on my phone, makes sense, fine, because I'm going to have a terrible experience trying to draw with my finger anyway. Fair enough. But why can't I just change some of my account stuff? There's inconsistencies like this, like left, right, and center. Like, there's so many small ones that I don't like. I can't just like automatically think of them. But like, come on, guys, like, let's get it together here. And then you have, and this is the tie-in with the app overload, you have these separation of apps. So I've already mentioned the Facebook and the Pages Manager, 2 different apps, right? And then you got the whole PlayStation experience. You got the PlayStation app or the PS app, followed by the PS Messages app. By the way, they were together before. And then you have the Communities app, which is on the PlayStation as well. So you got 3 different apps there now. You got YouTube and YouTube Music. It's like, why isn't there just a music mode in the YouTube app? Like, and then there's YouTube Gaming. Actually, I forgot to write that one down. There's YouTube Gaming, so there's that. And I kind of understand the YouTube Gaming thing with the streams, but like, why isn't there just a YouTube Gaming mode? Like, I don't, as far as I know, there's a Netflix Kids profile, but there's not a Netflix Kids app. Maybe there is, but I haven't seen one. And even if there is, you could just go to the profile. You know what I'm saying? Like, why isn't that even just an option there? Could you actually check that, Mike, if there's a Netflix Kids app?
No,
I'm just
curious.
There isn't. So it's all in one. It's all in one. Like, come on, guys. Another one is Google, of course. We've mentioned Google Hangouts. Then there's Allo. There's Duo. Then there's Messages, like Android Messages. And that does your RCS and your SMS, which RCS is another whole gong show, if you will. Like, it's a whole freaking disaster. Like, there's like carriers aren't supporting it. There's like, we're trying to get the rollout, and it's like, why didn't you just keep up with Hangouts? Like, just modernize Hangouts. Like, what are you doing?
I've had RCS since it came out because Rogers was one of the first adapters, and I've never in my life sent an RCS message.
How do you do it, if I may ask?
It's supposed to be SMS, right? So if another person is on Rogers or on an RCS capable carrier, as far as I know, and he has an Android device that is capable of doing RCS and is also on an RCS capable thing, and if you have that,
God. Okay.
You could send a message and it should automatically detect and tell you that it was an RCS message. But the problem is that it doesn't work across iPhone and Android. And like, unfortunately, I do send a lot of messages to people on Android, but I think most of them use WhatsApp anyway, so that's gone. Like, RCS doesn't apply to WhatsApp, and the ones that I do send text messages on are usually Apple because they use iMessage. You know what I mean? Like the only time that people don't use WhatsApp are the people that use iMessage exclusively, because iMessage is actually a decent solution. Unfortunately, again, it can't send like iMessage messages to Android apps, and they will. I guarantee you, they will never implement RCS, because that's kind of killing their whole vibe of sending it to themselves. Like that's why BBM, right? The BlackBerry Messenger held out for so long and not putting it on any other device other than BlackBerry, because people use Blackberries just for BBM. People use Apple devices just for iMessage.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, why would they kill off? Because they're not going to be able to negotiate all the features, I'm sure, that they've put into iMessage into RCS. Maybe like, even if that's possible, because like you're probably gonna have to. I'm not sure entirely how it works, but I know there's carriers involved. You're gonna have to somehow go to the carriers, or maybe it's a device side thing. But like, it's a mess, because then you're gonna have to go to each device manufacturer, especially in the Android scene, and go to like. So for example, Android Messages is the default messaging SMS app, for example, on a lot of phones, but it's not on the Samsung. There's messaging, I think it's called, or maybe it is called Messages, but it's the Samsung developed one.
Yep.
On Samsung devices. And a lot of people don't understand that. Facebook Messenger on Android can take over your SMS and asks you, when you install it and start using it, do you want it to take over? Yep. A lot of people just press yes for everything, so they're going to have their SMS coming through there, and they don't care. Like, they just get a notification like, oh, like Bill texted me, and they just talk to him. They don't care. Yeah. So like to ask people to micromanage, and now you're like separating people too. There's a major inconsistency right there. So you got your whole iPhone thing. Now you got inconsistencies in the whole Android thing, because you got the manufacturers. RCS is everywhere. There's different SMS apps that some might support RCS, some might not. You could be on an RCS supported carrier with another Android guy that has an RCS supported carrier, and you could have an RCS supported app and somebody else couldn't. Yep.
Well, I don't know if Facebook Messages supports RCS, and you're right. A lot of people use that as their SMS app. So there we go. There's another hurdle.
Like this is chaos at this point. Like this is utter chaos.
Like it was supposed to be the answer to iMessages for Android, but then it almost, well, I mean, nothing is hindered by it, but it also doesn't help anything.
I don't know why they just didn't. First of all, if they want to go to Allo, fine. Then Google Hangouts shuts down that day, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You get a support day end. You say it's ending in 3 months, but we're not supporting it anymore, and we're moving to Allo. If you don't move to Allo, I don't care. But you're Google. You're huge. Just do it. Like just do it.
But
like,
instead, they released another version of Google Hangouts for Business.
Oh my god.
So they released Allo. Released Duo. Now Allo is failing. They've admitted Allo is failing, so that's probably going to go away because this is Google. And then they've released another completely separate application again for Google Hangouts Business or something like that. I'm going to check what it's actually called, but it's like another point for the inconsistencies. It has no common design language with the current Google Hangouts. So you can have Google Hangouts on your phone and another application called Google Hangouts with something at the end.
It's totally different.
And it's not even close. Like you can't even navigate them the same way. Like I don't understand that. Like Skype does the same thing, right? Skype for Business is completely different than the regular Skype.
I've used it once, tried to send a message, it didn't send, and then stopped. Now, admittedly, that's a very low effort exposure to it. God knows, because we just set up our account at the time. So, but
I'm going to send you a link right now, Matt. The Google Hangouts for Business. We've used Google Hangouts a lot, just a precursor to this. So we know the design language and like the UX experience. Here's Google Hangouts for Business, just like a few screenshots of it. There you go.
Oh God, here we go.
It's called Google Hangouts Meet. Has almost the exact same logo.
Yeah. It almost has the Duo camera thing, I think. Yep. I want to say, with like the Hangouts like speech bubble icon.
Yeah. And literally none of the design language, and I mean absolutely zero, represents anything from Google Hangouts.
It is material design, but it doesn't look material design for me.
Well, it's new. It's the new material design, or it's like a different. Either way, they've looked at Google Hangouts, or I'm guessing actually did not look at Google Hangouts, and they're like, hey, let's make another Hangouts application without any of the same design language, but let's call it Hangouts.
Yeah.
And let's only do it for like, I don't know.
Just call it, or just rebranding Google Hangouts as Allo, and then have Allo for work.
G Suite Messaging for Business or something like that. That's a terrible name, but like it's still better than naming it the exact same thing as your messaging app and then making it completely different. Again, inconsistencies. Like you're right that there's too many of them across the same developers, across the same massive companies that don't have any right to do that. Like have one standard for design, and then update the standard and be like, listen, you guys have 6 months to a year to update your standard, get it up to date.
Like get it done. Like what's going on here? Like we have I'm just gonna flip through here, but so we have I have one written down, and I'm gonna check on something actually because there's a major inconsistency in the Google Home app that drives me crazy. But so we have Google Podcasts, of course. That's the new podcast app by Google, right? Mm-hmm. For a while we've had Google Podcasts. I'm going to personally call it the Google Podcast Assistant Applet because I don't know what it's formally called. So you could go to your Google Assistant, which I'm not going to say the keyword because I have one behind me at the moment, a Google Home. But you could say your keyword. So you could say Google Play this podcast, and then I thought she activated. That scared me. But you could say, play this podcast, and she would do it. And what it would be is you would actually be basically a Google Podcast thing. The thing is that if you did that in your phone in the Assistant app, it would actually open up essentially Google Podcasts. Mm-hmm. It would actually open that up, or like a little applet of it, and it would like play it and do whatever, everything else. Now, in terms of the home experience, in terms of wirelessly saying what you want, like you just say what you want. I want you to play this podcast, and it'll pick up from where you want. You can do the next episode and stuff. It's great. Okay, it's fantastic. That's fine. From what I've seen, and I don't know whether this is a bug because I've only done it once, so full disclaimer. It did not sync my play history with the Google Podcast app. So there's that. Here's another thing. If I want to cast, because I used CastBox primarily as my podcast app, if I want to cast to the Google Home or to the Chromecast, I can do that in CastBox. I cannot do that in Google Podcasts, but the Google Podcast Assistant applet is essentially activating and essentially doing the cast on the frickin' device without me doing anything on my phone, without me saying anything, with only saying something. Mm-hmm. What is going on? And there's no desktop version of Google Podcasts. Nope. So there's that. Like we're on there because like people use Google Podcasts. I'm not saying it's a bad app. Like there's some missing features here because it's like essentially Gen 1. But like at the end of the day, it's like you're a massive company. I understand this. I understand it's hard to develop things. But like, why isn't there all these other features? Why isn't there casting? Like, why isn't there this? Why isn't there that? And last I checked, and I haven't checked in a couple of months. I was going to look it up, but I'm not going to go diving into an app at the moment. But the last I checked in Google, it's either Google Home or the Google Assistant settings. I don't remember which one. I think it's Google Assistant, actually. I can't set... Oh, here she goes. She just said she doesn't understand. I can't set YouTube Music as a frickin' music provider. Yep. Why isn't that done? People are like, oh, it's a for Gen 1. This should be Gen 1. You should have that. You're trying to sell me your home products. What's going on here? It's like honestly, if I could, you know how good it would be to have YouTube, like if you were a Spotify premium subscriber, okay? Mm-hmm. And let's say you don't care about like cuz Spotify can be made the default music player of your Google Assistant, right? Yep. If let's say you don't care about Spotify and you just want to flip around and you really like that YouTube premium subscription, well, you could hypothetically drop Spotify, grab the YouTube premium subscription, but then you won't be able to wirelessly talk to your device to friggin' use YouTube Music. Why is that? Like, it should be that. That's such a UX problem. Yeah, it's inconsistent as hell.
Yep, it's inconsistencies, and like it's frustrating when other apps do it so well, like Google apps do it so well, and then all of a sudden they release an app that can't do it at all. Like that you have the engineers that can do this, and you're a massive company. And no one was expecting this to come out. No one's like waiting for this Google YouTube Music thing to be like, oh man, you know what? If they don't come out this month, then that's it. I'm done with Google. That's it. I'm freaking done. These guys are bastards. Like no one's doing that, so they just wait another month, implement this feature that everyone needs to switch to it, and then release it. Implement all the features of your previous application that worked just fine, that had a few problems with it, like that you could have actually just taken and fixed. But no, this is Google, so that's ridiculous. Let's just leave that aside. No, take those features, implement them into your application, build upon that, make a new, better UX or whatever, make a new application, release it. That makes sense. Don't strip all the features out. Make 4 features. Oh my God, 4 features work amazingly. Congratulations. 90% of the other applications out there can do those 4 features amazingly. And then you come in and you're like, oh, here's another one to add to the fire. Here you go. But it can't do any of the other stuff, so don't worry about it. No, like that's not. And then, okay, while we're on the topic of YouTube Music, my biggest gripe with YouTube Music, and I have a subscription to it because I have a Google Play Music subscription, so they give you access to it. Why does it fill up your history in YouTube and all of your suggested content becomes music when you listen to freaking YouTube Music?
That's fucking stupid. I didn't know that.
If you have 2 separate applications, why are they all of a sudden sometimes linked and sometimes not linked? Like, why would anyone think that I would want to view the music that I'm listening to on the desktop site or even on the YouTube app? Who thought of that? Like, who thought that was a great idea? It's like, oh, this guy's listening to I don't know, like some chill hop or something like that. Let's fill up his entire freaking recommended YouTube thing with chill hop. Even though he watches tech videos, he's subscribed to a bunch of tech videos, he's subscribed to coding on YouTube. No. He listened to chill hop music once. Nope, that's it. All of his recommended content, his next content is just chill hop. So I personally cannot and will not use YouTube Music just for that reason, because it's just, I like my YouTube recommended stuff to actually be recommended, because sometimes I find something new on there. Like, it's a pretty good recommendation engine, to be fair. Like, YouTube has very good technology for that kind of stuff. But when I listen to a random song on YouTube Music, and it fills up my entire recommended with random songs that I don't want to listen to, when I can just go into my YouTube Music app and literally click on recommended. It's just, yeah, that's my mini rant on YouTube Music. I hope that gets fixed. I don't know if that, I know that people have brought that up as a bug, but I'm sure that the YouTube Music team has been like, no, that's a feature. Everyone wants that.
Well, as a brief brief related note on that, actually, I just opened up the settings, and YouTube Music is actually available as a default music thing in Google Home now, in the Home app / Assistant app, because I think they're the same. And it says here, YouTube Music, free service available when using a screen. YouTube Music Premium required on other devices. Because I remember before, you could not set YouTube Music, but you could set YouTube and have the screen on as the music provider.
Yeah.
So now it's like they're together and it says YouTube Music. So just bringing that up.
But the point was that it wasn't on launch, right? Like, it wasn't there at launch, and that doesn't make any sense.
That doesn't make any sense. And then your point too. Like, I should have a music profile, like Spotify.
Yeah.
Part of Spotify, if it has like it has like the I saw people tweeting like they have like their daily mix or whatever, and they like share their playlists and all this stuff, and they do that I think in Apple Music as well. But it's like, why is it that YouTube doesn't have a separate, like, why isn't it like my username.music essentially?
Yep.
You know, why isn't it like that? And if I want it both, why can't I set it? Why can't I just say like, oh, I want them merged? Because like maybe you just listen to music and then you sometimes watch music videos. Maybe that's all you do. Fair enough. You want your things to be the same? Do it. But like, why isn't that? That's so stupid.
Yeah, that's so stupid. It's the most ridiculous feature I've ever seen. Like, and the funny thing is that there's so much room here to put a music tab. Like, just go to YouTube.com and put a music tab somewhere. I can't even access YouTube Music from YouTube.com. Like, how do I even do that? Why are they together? Like, what? Like, if I type in YouTube Music, I'm just gonna do this live while we're talking here, because this is.
We've already had like 3 or 4 live like checks.
Yeah, there we go. So if I type in YouTube Music, it's the same goddamn page. Like, what? Why can I not access this?
Wait, what's the problem exactly? What's the problem with that? Like, what's happening exactly?
What's happening is that, like, if I go to YouTube.com, how do I access just YouTube Music? Is there a web app for YouTube Music, or are they just expecting me to like listen to videos? Is that what they're expecting? Like, if I go,
that's a fair question, actually. Is there a separate web? Oh yeah, there is on the right. You have to use the app grid. So I clicked on like the app grid, and there's YouTube TV, YouTube Gaming, YouTube Music, YouTube Kids, Creator Academy, YouTube for Artists.
There we go. Okay, there we go. Now I got to YouTube Music somehow. Like I couldn't Google it. I Googled it and I got here. So if I listen to a song now,
that's weird that you Googled it and couldn't get there.
Yeah, that's a weird. Exactly, that's another inconsistency. So I had to go on and click on that grid because that's very intuitive.
But what's stupid is like, I mean, if what you say is true here, like this is a separate app that kind of looks like Spotify, which is fine. I'm not dissing the design, whatever. That's fine. Looks like it's fine. I haven't used it.
Yeah,
looks like it's okay. Fair enough, right? But why is it affecting? We went to a separate app here now.
Yeah.
Why is it affecting YouTube? And also, by the way, I don't know how to get back because that little app icon is gone.
Yep.
Where's my, like, how do I switch back? I don't think I can. I might be able to, but I can obviously go back. But it's music. I'm now at music.youtube.com. Where's that like little app grid? It's like the 9 squares. Where's that?
It's gone now. Again, inconsistency in design.
Oh my god! Like this was one of the things that we tried to push on one of our clients. Was I said like we should have the same navbar because he like runs like a membership site, and I said we should have the same navbar across all your sites, and then have a switcher, and it just changes the color, and people will get used to switching, like because it's inconsistent otherwise. Like it's all over the place. Like now I gotta go back. It's not like it's the biggest thing in the world, right? That I have to go back, or I think it actually opened a new tab, so I could just go back to my other tab. But why isn't there a way to switch back? Like it doesn't make any sense.
I can't explain it. I don't know what to say because it's frustrating as hell.
And actually, I'll bring this up because I said I was going to. Reddit. Holy Lord. Okay. Yeah. Going to Reddit. Okay. Now, I'm in Canada. I don't know if it's a geolocation thing. I'm on Chrome, on Windows 10. Maybe it's that. I don't know. But what I did was I'm signed in. I go in there and I click like create new community or whatever. I click the create a subreddit button essentially. And it says, we'll redirect you in a moment. Now, I'm on the redesign, okay? Click that. Click it on the redesign. Doesn't take me anywhere. And it says, if we don't redirect you, click this button. Click the button. All it does is take me back to the page. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on. So I go and I use the old Reddit. I say, I don't opt out of the redesign. I go to the old Reddit specifically. It makes me sign in again. So I sign in again. No big deal, right? Now, signed in. Now I click the new Reddit button, new subreddit button. It takes me through, and it's like, do your name, your title, your sidebar, your this, your that, your all of them. Okay, fair enough. So I do all of that. Okay, get it all set up, get it running. Now it like takes me to the subreddit, and I'm messing around in there, but I'm in the old. So I'm like, okay, I want to see how it looks in the redesign. Go to the redesign. This is where the trouble starts. It doesn't do the same spacing in my description as it does on the other one, so that's good. Couldn't figure out how to fix that. So I said, okay, for now, whatever. It was supposed to be 2 paragraphs. It's 1. I don't really care. It's not a super long piece of content. So then I'm like, wait a second here. All my rules are in the sidebar. Where are my rules? Can't find it. Don't know where it is. Go over here to the mod tools in the redesign, and that's where I'm supposed to put my rules. But my rules don't appear on the old Reddit. So now I got an old interface to edit stuff. By the way, some of these mod tools take you to the old site. So an example. I was going through and I said, okay, let me set up some flares. I want to have some post flares for, I believe I set up guide, maybe podcast, and something else. I forget. I set up a couple. And then it says, hey, do you want a custom class? And I noticed when going through in the redesign, the appearance thing, that there was a CSS button. So I said, okay. So I went through and I did I don't know what the classes are, guide, flare, and whatever, right? Something readable. Mm-hmm. Set them up. Then I go into my appearance thing, find my CSS. And when I hover over it, my cursor turns to an X, or like a little cross out, almost like the no smoking sign. So I say, okay, I don't know why that's not working. So I Google it, and there's a post from a while back, and somebody's like, hey, I'm setting custom CSS, and I'm setting classes for my flares. What's going on here? So there's and this is a Reddit thread, so take this with a grain of salt. But there's a discussion about people doing it. And it's working for them, and they're just talking about the differences. And I said, well, I can't get this to work. So I Googled it again with the redesign, couldn't find anything. So I Google CSS with the redesign. Why can't I set my CSS? Then there's a little thread that's just hey, I see CSS in the appearance thing. Why isn't the CSS available in the redesign? And somebody's I think it was a mod or something was there isn't any, or something like that. And he's like, well, when will it be available? I don't know, or something like that. It was really like nonchalant, like, oh, we're unsure. Like it was professional. It was professional, like, to be clear. Like it wasn't anything stupid. But it's like, okay, but why wasn't the redesign released with CSS? Like there's some things that are MVP, I understand. Yep. But was releasing the redesign, and I believe this thread was from 2017, was releasing the redesign with so many problems where it had to refer to the old Reddit and it didn't redirect properly, and there's things missing, and there's like, because like I had to get the rules to work, there's a whole different rules tab, and people were like, well, if you had referred to the subreddit for mods, you would know that there's a whole new rules area. It's like, dude, like, I'm trying to set this up. I'm not a professional Redditor. I just want to have a subreddit. I'm trying to use your website. Why isn't it easy and intuitive? And it's inconsistent as hell. I'm being taken to the old site, the new site. I'm setting classes for flares that don't apply in half the site. Then I got to go back to the old site sometimes because sometimes the redirects don't work. I got to explicitly go to the old site, re-sign in, do that type of stuff. But if I accidentally click out and it takes me to the redesign, now if it didn't take me to a new tab, I've lost the old. So I got to browse back to the old, go back through the menus. This is not good. This is not good. And this touches on, we made Free Photos Hamilton, and we made the UX for the people posting the pictures not that great. And we thought it wouldn't be that bad, but it's so bad that we don't even want to post pictures. It got to that. Like, that was a lesson. That was a lesson learned. It was like, holy Christ! I gotta make a compressed version. Gotta upload that. Then I gotta zip it, but only in some circumstance. And then I gotta upload it. Like, it was a mess, right? It was our first like kind of big project, so obviously it was a mess. It worked, and it still works. You can still download stuff, and the UX for people is fine. But that's the lesson learned: is we want good UX too. Mm-hmm. This is not good UX for the mods. I'm telling you right now, this is, like, to my honest opinion, this is not good UX. The redesign looks good, but why, like, what's going on here?
It looks okay. I wouldn't say it looks great.
I would say it looks better than, I would say I like the top bar a lot, myself.
I don't know. I think it takes up too much wasted space. I'm a big fan of, like, just the old Reddit. It might be just one of those things where I just can't get, like, haven't gotten used to the new Reddit. But I really, really don't like that they've closed down so many APIs. Because all these extensions like Res, the Reddit Enhancement Suite, will not be able to work. And I literally rely on that for Reddit. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to use Reddit when they fully like integrate the new redesign. Just because
I think Res is still working though, right?
I think 90% of its functionality has been stripped out because and they've released a statement saying they will not be able to add the functionality back in because the new redesign closes out a bunch of APIs that they were using.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
like this is the whole thing, right? Whereas I don't want to comment. Like, I don't actually know. I'm not an insider, and I know their intention, Reddit's intention. But just as an onlooker, a lot of these companies are trying to close out their API. Do you remember that there used to be third-party Netflix apps?
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
And those are gone now, though. And I think it's the same mentality.
I think it is. I think you're right. Because Reddit needs to monetize. Like, they don't make money. Reddit is not a money-making site right now. Like, they cover their costs and maybe make a tiny bit of money, but they're not like scalable to make money. So they're trying their best to be able to appeal to the people and to be able to somehow make money in the end, like with advertising. So they're trying to make a layout that's more, I guess, sponsored post friendly is my guess.
Right.
Now luckily they have the disaster of Dig doing the same thing to look back on and not do. So
Dig this, the little share button I remember back in the day.
You remember Dig? Yeah. So Dig, I was there for that. So I was using Dig. I don't know if it was like 2.0 or 1.0. I don't remember. There was an upgrade from like 2.0 to 3.0 or 3.0 to 4.0, and they just did it overnight kind of thing.
Oh,
they were talking about it a little bit, but then they all of a sudden just did the upgrade overnight. And usually, you know how like there's just a bunch of like people complaining that they don't know where everything is and it's a shitty upgrade, like it's just terrible. And usually that goes away and tapers off, and then people get used to it. Kind
of like Facebook.
Yep.
Like this group 100 times
exactly.
to get the old Facebook back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That stuff like that. Dig. What literally happened was they did the redesign. Everyone, and I mean absolutely everyone on the site was like, "Put it back, or we're leaving." And they're like, "No. This is the new design. We like it. Everything's good." Everyone left.
Oh my god.
Everyone went to Reddit, and that's how Reddit became popular. The Dig downfall was Reddit's uprising. Like,
is Dig still a thing?
Go to it. Like, it is still a thing, but it's hardly anything that it used to be. Like, Dig used to be Reddit, and it could have stayed Reddit if it just didn't do the redesign that Reddit is attempting to do, but they're doing it more elegantly.
It's a news site.
It's a news site now, yeah. So it's nothing like it was before. Like, it used to be, it used to be Reddit. Right.
Wow.
So it was crazy like that, and it's taught in school. It's taught in like school now and stuff like that. That you don't do what Dig did. There are circumstances to doing something against all of your fans and stuff like that. And they did it for the exact same reason, right? Like, they did it because they weren't making any money, and they needed a layout and a back end that could generate sponsored posts, and like it could make people click on that kind of stuff, which, I mean, it in one sense makes sense because somehow you need money, right? Like, you need revenue, but they unfortunately flipped a switch that they could not flip back, or they refused to flip back, and that killed them. So,
oh my god, like that's such a mess too. It's like, yeah. I mean, they could have flipped it back, but they just didn't.
I'm assuming, yeah, exactly. They just didn't because they were being like headstrong, and I mean, they were doing the same thing that like Facebook, right? Like Facebook, they knew about that beforehand because Facebook had done it probably like 3 or 4 times by the time that Dig did it. They're like, well, Facebook's still around and it keeps going up. Like, they have a little bit of a dip after, and then they go up even higher. So why can't we? But unfortunately, it didn't work out to them because at the same time that they did that, Reddit kind of came in and took all their users. So I guess they thought they were too big to fail, but I think Reddit's doing it like a better way because they're kind of doing it slowly and actually taking users' thoughts into account. But I still don't think it's going to go well for them.
I think I read it. Well, I know I read an article on Medium actually about that where Facebook uses the data. Or I don't know whether it was whether a person from Facebook or whether it was just an onlooker, but they said that Facebook, like, people will freak out whenever there's like a change, but they say that Facebook just sticks with the data. Like, they've done the research on the redesign and they're like, no, this is going to be better. Like, we know it's going to be better.
Yeah.
We know you're going to freak out, but we know you're going to stay and we know it's going to be better.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering whether Dig just, I mean, I wasn't there for it, but like maybe they didn't do the research well enough or something.
Well, for sure. Like, they for sure did not do the research well enough. That's goes without almost without saying because of the consequences. Yeah. I think like if Facebook did a change as severe as what Dig did, even they couldn't have withstanded it. Although Facebook is a different animal because there's really nothing that could replace it right now. There's stuff that's tried, that little elephant icon. I can't remember what the website's called, but when Facebook was going through its like massive privacy issue that they leaked all those things to the that London company or whatever it was called. They like a bunch of companies tried to come out of the woodwork and be like, oh, listen, we're Facebook alternatives, but they went pretty much nowhere. So
there was like that Instagram one that like blew up for like a day and a half, and then suddenly like it went crazy. Like people went crazy and started deleting accounts or something.
Exactly. So like it's just I think Facebook is too big to fail at this point. At least not in a Dig sort of way. Like Dig, I think was almost next day failure. Like it was so quick. I use the site extensively, like every day, just like I use Reddit, and I stopped using it immediately. That's how bad the redesign was.
Holy God!
Like literally nothing worked the same way. Everything was just terrible. All the upvoting, like everything was just completely redesigned, and functionality wise, it was just bad.
How do you use the redesign on Reddit?
No, I don't.
You don't. So when they force it, if they are you going to?
That's
like, are you gonna
that's my question. Like I don't. I rely on the Reddit enhancement suite a lot for convenience. Right. Like so unless they have taken some of what Reddit enhancement suite does and implemented it into the actual base application, which is fair. If they do that for at least most of the features, I'll still use it. Like I'll still go about and use it. If they don't do it, yeah, I might not use it anymore. Like I'll try to find something else, but I don't know. I don't hate it as much. I'll tell you that. I don't hate it as much as I hated Dig's redesign, and even like it's not out yet, so that's good. I think that's a good start.
Yeah, they're like at least like almost testing the waters, right?
Exactly.
Like you could opt out of it and then just be like out of it. Yeah. I almost want to do that, but then there's that whole thing now where we're mods. like now we have this whole problem where it's like, well, if I didn't fill in that rules tab and I opted out of the redesign, and then people in the redesign were coming in, they don't get the sidebar tab. They get a rules tab on the sidebar. Well, so now the rules are blank for them. They don't think there's any rules.
You can opt in and out.
No, you can opt in and out. But what I'm saying is that if like let's say like I don't mind the redesign, but like let's say for example I opted out, just went on my merry way, set up my Reddit because there was no rules tab in the setup, my subreddit. There was no rules section, and then later I was like, I went through my subreddit. I was like, oh, it looks fine, thinking that the redesign would take the changes, but then it didn't because there's that inconsistency there.
Yep.
Then it's like, I could, which I did notice because I started questioning it because I saw all these problems, but it's still a problem. You know what I mean? It's still an issue when it's like when you could easily miss something as vital as rules. It's like, I think you may need to rethink how we reset up subreddits. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like I'm looking at the redesign right now. At least.
I use the official Reddit app, and I find that it has the same vibe. So I've never.
Doesn't it send you random notifications though for like random posts for random trending subreddits? Like I don't like that feature.
I think it did, and I think I just turned it off.
Okay, fair enough.
It's been a long time though, so I don't remember really. But I think I know that Imager does. The Imager app.
That's annoying.
Will just like randomly be like, oh, this is the best photo in the awe category. It's like, oh, all right, thanks.
So immediately what I see that I can't live without is a bar where it has all of my subreddits at the top, or like I can favorite a bunch of subreddits so that they can stay at the top. Is there a way to do that in this?
And in the top left beside the Reddit logo, that's a drop down, and then there's a favorites section.
Okay, and then how does the favorite section work? It just
literally when you star something, it goes right below the Reddit feeds. So there's like the Reddit feed section with the home, popular, all, and original content. Below that it says favorites. So if I click to open this little thing, we
probably should do this offline. I don't think.
Well, I guess. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is web news. We can. This is the convo part. But anyway,
yeah,
I think that concludes the episode.
Yeah, I think we're good. I think we went a little bit of a ramble, but that's fine.
Well, I mean, we should. Like, it's the conversation part. So at least we didn't do that in like one of the segments, and then have to do web news after. That'd be a long freaking episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, we'll take the website out now. So, in conclusion, thanks for listening. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on the platform of your choice. You can follow us on the social medias at HTML all the things. That's on Facebook and Instagram. You can also find us on Twitter at HTML everything. We're on Medium. We're on GitHub. Make sure to check the show notes for all these things. Remember, we're also on Patreon at patreon.com/HTML all the things. Yeah. And surprise, we actually have our first patron/supporter there on Patreon. Mike, you want to give him the shout out that he deserves?
Oh yeah, our first Patreon supporter, Grigory Richkin, big fan of the show. He's been actually giving us a lot of feedback as we've been going. He's been following since the first episode. So huge thank you to Grisha. Thanks a lot for listening and giving us the feedback that we so desperately need.
Heck yeah.
I think because of him, we've actually improved quite a bit. So thank you for being our first supporter as well.
I think he was the first endorser, if that's a word. The first endorser of the web news segment, which has actually gotten us positive feedback from other folks as well.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting. Anyway, so remember to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you're listening to this on, and we are signing off.